tell us a little bit about where you grew up, how you grew up, and then where this interest to start learning about yourself and dive deeper into your own consciousness and spirituality. Where did that come from? So let's take viewers back there.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll start by saying that I was born in Argentina and come from a family of mostly immigrants. Like, yeah, well, I would say everyone was immigrants from Europe, mostly Jewish tradition. So I grew up with that over there, and I had a really nice childhood, school activities, sports, and quite typical in that sense. And then when I was a kid, my parents started to become interested in their personal development and what we would call their spiritual journey. And through that, little by little, by the time that I was 10, 11, 12, they would start to share a little bit of the things that they were learning with us at the dinner table. Little by little, that morphed into me being interested in reading some of the books that they were, like recommending or suggesting me and my siblings to read that were on different traditions, different things, from what I was used to and what I grew up and what was around me. There was something in there that I was, kind of like interested in, but I wasn't fully understanding why I was interested in that. So by the time that I was like late teenager, 15, 16, 17, I started to go with my parents to some classes, or they would suggest if we wanted to go and see a healer or a therapist. And with some things it would be like yes, and sometimes some of my siblings would say yes, sometimes no. So it was quite open with that. It wasn't something that we needed to do. And one of the things that happened, there were two specific things that happened that were quite significant in my journey. One was when I went to a Tibetan yoga class, and that was a big changer in my life because it was the first time that I actually felt my body. Up until that moment, I thought that I knew how my body felt, but I actually didn't know. So it was the first time that I felt my body, and I felt the energy moving within. So I started to feel feelings. And it was interesting because up until that moment, growing up, every single time that my parents would ask me how I was always saying, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And they would always kind of probe and ask, how are you really? And I would always be like, I'm fine. Later on, I realized I was so disconnected that perhaps they were picking up on that, but I didn't know that I wasn't fine. So when I started to do Tibetan yoga and I started to feel all of this, I started to also notice how much stress I was carrying, how anxious I was, how angry I was. And this was easy to see when I started driving because I had road rage. So for those that see, like on the movies and things like that, people having so much rage and they start to flip their fingers to everyone and shout to everyone. That was me. And little by little, as I was practicing Tibetan yoga and getting more acquainted with my body, with energy, with feelings and how to move them, I started to notice that not only I was feeling great during the classes, I started to notice how in daily life things started to change. So as an example, I was driving one day and someone cut me off, and instead of going into this rage, I suddenly felt, oh, there's this feeling in my stomach and in my chest. And I was able to be with it and breathe into it, and I didn't react. I just kept on driving. And I was like, in that moment, I remember being like, oh, this is interesting. I had never had this before. I want to explore this further. So I continue doing that, and I'm going to segue to the other that happened. So I went into a Reiki healing session, and I had no idea really what it was, but I was open to it. And when I was laying down on that table, and the practitioner started to do the healing, I started to feel all of it. I was feeling everything that he was doing, even though he wasn't touching me. And I was like, whoa, this is super interesting. And I was so curious about it that when we finished the session, I asked him, like, I want to do more of this. Like, how can I learn this? And he told me that this is something that he teaches. So I was like, oh, cool, awesome. How, like, how does it work? Like, and suddenly he stops for a moment and he closed his eyes. And I see him kind of like looking towards up here, towards his left. And later on, I realized that he had a connection with either guides or angels or other beings. And he says, I'm being told that you're going to help a lot of people in the future, so this is going to be for free for you. And I was like, oh, cool. In that moment, I was more like, oh, cool, something free, awesome, more than
Yeah.
understanding the implication of what that meant. Um,
Yeah, you were
so
probably like, okay, thank you, without realizing that you'd be here one day.
yes, exactly. I was like, I
Yeah,
just
a
wanted that for myself.
couple questions. That first Tibetan meditation class, was that in Argentina, and how old were you?
Yes, that was in Argentina. I was a teenager. I can't remember. I think that I was 16 or 17, something like that. That was the first class that I did of Tibetan yoga and meditation. I was like, wow, this is this
And
is
you
different.
you felt that big shift immediately within the first class?
Yeah, so in the first class, the biggest thing was I was able to actually feel my body. I was able to feel my feelings. Whereas before that, I thought that I used to, but I realized that I was just thinking throughout my life. I wasn't actually feeling in my body. And that was the biggest shift.
Okay. What did they do during that class? What kind of exercises did they have you do during the class that, you being a teacher now, that those exercises help, but what were those exercises that they walked everyone through?
So the first class, we did some of what I would call the basic exercises of this practice that in Tibetan it is called Kum Nye, Nye. They were a lot of really slow movements to activate certain pathways in the body so that then you could feel where there was tension and then slowly how to allow that to be moved. So there were a lot of movements that we did with the shoulders, a lot of movements that we did with the head, a lot of movements that we did with more what I would call activating energy in the body. So working with the lower body energy to move some of that energy that is sometimes stuck or that there's not enough activation or resourcing in the body, and then expanding that. So a lot of more open heart opening and arms moving practices. So I think that the combination of all of that was something that really helped me. And partly what really helped me was the slowing down because I was used to, like playing basketball, football, tennis, like practicing taekwondo. I was all of the time really dynamic movement and everything fast. And then for the first time, I was able to really slow down. And that gave me as well the space to feel into it.
And then when you started learning the Reiki, how many classes did you take of that? How long did you study that for?
Yeah, so initially I did, like in Reiki, there's usually 3 levels, unless you wanted to learn how to teach. So that's the fourth level. And that's what I ended up doing. So the first level, I did it like quite nearby that date. Like I just asked him and he was like, oh yeah, in a couple of weeks. And then uh, it was 1 year after the second level, 1 year after the third level, 1 year after the fourth level. So in between all of that, it was more about practicing by myself and, like just continuing with the process. And alongside that as well, I learned a few other healing techniques that were in a sense similar but different. And so I was kind of like all of that really opened up that world for me. So I started to be more curious and exploring all of that. And then my parents took me to some sound healing sessions, and that was as well another big thing for me. So I started to to explore more of that, and I just fell in love with sound healing, and partly because in my meditation practices, a lot of times my mind was still super active. At that moment, I thought that to meditate, I need to completely shut off my mind and have it completely still and silence. When I went to do sound healing, the sounds and all of those vibrations were so overpowering that I realized, wow, for moments or minutes, I wasn't thinking at all. I was just completely in that space of those vibrations and those sounds. So that was kind of like, oh, there's something in here as well. So then I went with that.
Awesome. Well, Brian, tell us about the the other kind of breakthroughs that you had. I know you went to study in the US for a while. What was that? Where was that? And how was that experience like?
Yeah. So after I studied neuroscience and I kept on practicing and everything, and after moving to a few different places in the world, I decided that I wanted to focus more on living in these teachings that I was practicing, especially the Tibetan Buddhist teachings that I was really into. And so I moved to California to a Tibetan Buddhist retreat center in the middle of the mountain. And I ended up living there for 2 years. And it was a big immersion into Tibetan yoga, Tibetan meditation, a lot of the Buddhist teachings, just going deeper into it and understand as well how to live life with all of these life philosophy or these principles. And for me, that was huge to be able to really bring everything that for years I have been practicing and studying into something that I'm doing the entire time, and to have that space and that opportunity was great. And then with time over there, I started to also teach classes for people that would come on retreats and things like that. And yeah, that was, that was a big leap for me in terms of my own experience and my trust in myself and my capacity, because I was able to really, spend, instead of 1 hour a day or 1 hour, like going to a class, things like that. I was doing this 24/7. So that was an amazing experience.
What was the name of that retreat? What city or town was it in? And then what were your days like? What's a typical day there like? What time do you get up? What do you eat? What are the actual classes or things were you doing there on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So this is called Ratnaling. So it's a retreat center in Casadero in California. So it's Northern California, kind of like 2.5 hours north of San Francisco. And it's in the middle of the redwood forest. So, it's just like me and the community of 27 people. That's it. No one else, for, like a lot of space. And the every day was slightly similar in a sense. So I would wake up and I would go to the meditation space and I would do my Tibetan yoga and meditation practice. And then after an hour and a half of that, then I would go do to have breakfast. And then as a community at 8 a.m., then we will all come together and we would do a lot of different practices, especially with chanting. And then we would do a circle of sharing if there was anything that needed to be shared as a community. And then we, in a sense, divided into groups because, you're living there in the land, there's things to get done. So we all have our responsibilities in a sense. So we would divide into the groups of each part or area, and we would talk about what needed to happen. And then we would do our work as a practice. So the intention a lot of times was, as you're working, as you're doing the tasks that you need to do, you are working with your body, with your mind, with your energy, with your focus, with your, your satisfaction levels, with cooperation with the other people that are there. So a lot of different practices or focuses alongside doing actual, work, because we need to sustain, in a sense, the center for it to make money. So we would have people coming for retreats, or we would teach classes, or a part of it was making books. So we had a publishing, Dharma publishing, that is part of it. So we would do a lot of different things like that. So we would work for chunks of time, and then we would go into another practice time. So one of the more senior people would be there and run a class on specific topics, and that was, all of the time changing within Buddhist psychology or philosophy, or more energy work, or more meditation focus. So it would always be something slightly different. And then we would continue working, break for lunch, continue working, break for a class, continue working. And then in the evenings, we would have more formal classes in a sense, that sometimes they were of Tibetan yoga and meditation. And a lot of them were about Buddhist history, philosophy, for depending on what you were interested. As I was, I also had classes of Tibetan language. So just learning Tibetan to be able to read the text and to then do translations. So that was basically every single day. And depending on what you wanted to do, you could do things on top of that. So for example, I wanted to go more and more than what we were being taught into some of the Tibetan yoga practices. So with my teacher, every single day we would do specific practices, just me. And that as well was something that was important for me, because I wasn't sure when I went there for how long I was going to stay. So I wanted to opportunity to be around the teachings and my teacher, and to be able to practice and experience. So I was so curious, and I had this, I don't know how long I'm going to be here for as well. So that was always in my mind.
So it sounded like you really wanted to get the most out of it and want to soak up everything like a sponge, basically.
Yeah, like, because I think that I realized how different and how precious that opportunity was, to be in my mid-20s and to decide I'm going to leave everything behind and I'm going to go into the middle of the mountain to a Buddhist retreat center. And, I have these amazing teachings and this amazing teacher, and I'm going to make the most out of it, because, initially I thought I'm going to stay here for some years, but as well, I didn't know. And it ended up that I only stayed there for 2 years. That was a lot, and it was an amazing experience, but my work visa extension was denied. So then I had to get out of there and leave the country. So that was, something that luckily I made the most out of it.
Yes. So these days you're living in New Zealand. What are you up to these days?
Yeah, so I've been in New Zealand now for the last 10 years, after living in the US and Europe for some years. And I've been sharing mostly and supporting people both individually or with working with businesses, organizations, teaching at university, mental health, running a lot of workshops, a lot of retreats, classes, all around how to live life differently from a holistic perspective, and being able to bring a shift from the living unconsciously and autopilot to living more consciously and choosing to live, this conscious, more mindful life, and deciding what it is that we want to do. So I work a lot with people around trauma or around shifting things to be able to support themselves, because unfortunately we don't learn this unless, like me, we go out and we seek. So there's something that, it's been very interesting, just understanding, okay, this is not every single day. So I guess an example, like yesterday when I was teaching at university, that most students have never heard of these things that I'm talking about, and I cannot blame them. This is the education that they got. So just being able to introduce whatever people are at the level that they are and what they are seeking, different things, is what I love doing. And I'm so fortunate that I'm able to actually have a beautiful life and make a living out of supporting people.
Yeah. If someone wants to work with you, what's that like? What's a session like? Just dive into that.
Yeah, it would really depend on what people come for. So some people come specifically for something. As an example, like there's people that come to do ancestral healing, or there's people to come for a sound healing or for an energy healing because of something specific. Then there's people that are more about a process of growth. So then instead of something specific like that, we come together and we explore more and we start to introduce a lot of different tools and techniques to be able to support that person based on where they are. So it's really always different. And with some people, it's more processes that I work with for months or years. And for some other people, is things that are just a one-time session. So it can be really different. With some people, it's more guiding them through meditation or through a movement practice. So yeah, it's always quite interesting.
And what's your routine like these days? Do you meditate like for an hour in the morning, and then what do you do? Like, what sort of breathing techniques do you do, or movement things do you do? Like, what's your routine like?
Yeah, so I throughout time, I actually understood how to integrate more all of the practices and the teachings into daily life so that I don't have to put so much time as I used to into my practice. That would be, let's say I want to meditate. I used to sit down for 1 hour and meditate. Now I can do short practices because I know how to use the rest of the time in that meditative state. So I can be talking to you here and I use this as my practice. So I don't need to then set another hour for just meditating, which, like I wake up, I do my movement practice, and then I do my mantras in my head. So it's a lot of different words that and affirmations that I say. And then I usually use my food and the water as moments that I do a lot of my practices. And then I'm just, depending on the day, working with clients or being at university. But I spend a lot of time more in that space of being more conscious of what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and creating space so that I don't have to all the time be rushing from one thing to the next.
I love that because we live in a very busy world where people have jobs, they have families, they have things to take care of. And if they're able to integrate that into their daily things that they already do, that's very attractive. So let's just take that as an example. Sitting here talking, how are you practicing that? Are you shifting your attention to the body while you're talking? Like, what's your whole process for practicing while you're doing something else like this interview here?
Yeah, definitely. So initially, I'm just going to tell you what I did initially versus what I'm doing now, because now it's been such a long time that there's certain things that I don't need to actively do at the beginning. Yes, it was if I'm here talking with you, at the same time, I'm trying to feel my feet, I'm trying to feel my bottom, like on the chair. I'm paying attention to the feelings that I have. I'm paying attention to how I'm breathing. So initially, it was kind of like I am with you here talking, but I'm also doing that. And then I started to realize that I didn't need to do that, that I could hold, in a sense, more wider awareness and I could include you in this conversation with the feeling. So I didn't have to specifically focus on, okay, I need to bring my awareness to my feet. I need to bring my awareness to my bottom. I need to bring my awareness to my hands, or I need to bring my awareness to my breath. Now it just happens because I'm including all of it. Because I've been practicing, like for over 20 years. So it makes it easier. It was initially about understanding how can I use the moment of what I'm doing to be more aware, to be more present. And sometimes, as I said, it was just focusing on what it was either internally happening or what it was externally happening. Because a lot of times it was about, just being aware, like, oh, there's this in here. Oh, look at that, plant and how it's moving, or the color, just being aware of that. And those things were really supportive. And as well, working a lot with work in terms of when I'm working, just checking, like how is my energy level? How is my concentration level? How am I actually doing this? How is my posture? How am I, engaging with what I'm doing? Do I have any motivation or not? So there's all of these little things that I started to just introduce more and more and more and more until They just became, in a sense, second nature.
So these days, I know you've told me this before, but these days, do you feel any stress or anxiety, or do you have any more of those road rage moments? Do you ever have challenges still these days? What's that like? And if they do come up, how do you handle it?
So I do have a lot of challenges, just, like I live in this world, and there's challenges both collectively and individually. I do not get stressed. I haven't been stressed in 16 years, and it's been wonderful. And that has been a big understanding on my need to control situations and as well allowing myself to flow with what's happening and learning from what's happening. And most importantly, to be able to feel what's happening so that I can process in real time what is taking place. So that, something happens and instead of taking it personally or having to repress it or push it aside or react, I'm able to be present with it. I'm able to move it, so feel it, move it, and respond appropriately. So it's been a very different experience. My first, let's say, like my first almost 20 years to my second 20 years of my life, my experience has been super different because I've been able to really integrate it. And I actually, many years ago, I had to have a conversation with my mom because I told her, how can people connect and resonate with me if I don't have any challenges? Because people have challenges and they want to feel supported by someone that understands these things. And she told me, Brian, you have had so many challenges, perhaps not the same or as many as other people. This is not about comparison. But she told me, this happened to you, this happened to you, this happened to you, this happened to you. And just because you had the tools to be with it, doesn't mean that the challenges weren't there. So, I was able, for example, like when I was in California, that I was thinking, okay, I'm here, I'm living in this place, I'm working, all of my life is there. And suddenly from one day to the next, I get a letter from immigration in the US saying that they didn't renew my visa and that from that day I was illegally staying in the country. I need to get out. And, like a lot of people would completely freak out and that would take them to so much stress. And I just sat with it and was like, well, this is what it is. What can I do with this? I'm just feeling the fact that nothing, there's nothing that I can do in that moment. I was like, okay, now I felt it. What do I do? I called the lawyers. I asked them what's going on. They tell me, like, we got this. Now you need to find a ticket to get out of the country as fast as possible. And if you want, we can fight it, but it's going to be months or years and a lot of money. Or you just go and continue with something else in your life. So I just did that, and I just felt, and that was it. A lot of times with people in my life dying or with relationships ending as well, I was able to sit with it and to feel it. So, and I was able to do this with things as well from the past. So in the moment that when I was a teenager that my grandfather died, in that moment I completely froze. I wasn't able to process it. Like I literally froze when the of the operating room and he told us that he had died. Like I literally froze. My hands were frozen like this. Like my auntie had to come and grab my hands to be able to bring them down because of literally I froze. And years later, I was able to go into that feeling that I was, that I was still carrying with me. And I was able to process it and release it so that I was no longer holding on to it. And I started to, every time that I was thinking about my grandpa, instead of crying and getting sad, I was able to change that to see it with gratitude and with love. So there's been a lot of things that has been amazing and changed with circumstances and changes and challenges.
Yeah, I think there's learning and self-development and awareness that you can build with yourself and your own body and your own emotions. One thing that's particularly challenging is when life circumstances happen around you, whether you have people who, family members that are very stressful or in an anxiety around you, and their energy can kind of come into your space where they're it makes you anxious because they are in this negative state too. So I'm assuming the process is still the same, right? Going into your body and you know trying to stay as aware as possible in your own self. How do you how do you if you have a student or a client, how do you guide them to navigate the tough environmental challenges, just people or environmental things happening around them?
Yeah, yeah. I work on this with a lot of my clients, actually. I work with a lot of people that would consider themselves empath. So then they would, like take on all of the suffering from the people around. And of course, with everyone is slightly different, but one of the main things is understanding their own energy. So the more that they understand what's their energy and how they interact with energy outside of them and what's not the energy, it is easier to not take on the energies of other people on the space, and as well bringing a mindset that is one of understanding that we don't know a lot of times what people have been through. We don't know people's traumas. We don't know people's childhoods. We don't know what they are carrying from their ancestors. And when we're able to go into every single situation with openness and compassion, because everyone is dealing with their own things, then we're able to see people differently. And we're able to see, that we don't need to take things personally. And the capacity to feel in the moment and to understand that difference of this is my energy at this moment, that is your energy, and I'm not going to allow that to have an impact on me. I can feel it so that then I can actually, empathize and be compassionate with you and potentially, if needed, support you like I need to do with most of my clients. But most importantly, it's about making sure that our energy remains, so that even though energy is always changing, there's a difference that can be felt within what's my energy and what's other energies from people. So those understandings can be crucial to be able to do this work.
Awesome. Well, I love your story. I love that you haven't felt stress in 16 years. I'm gonna get there someday. um,
Yeah.
I still get stressed and anxious every now and then.
Well,
But
so Alex, in this, for example, and this isn't like, the more that you acknowledge that and the more that you're able to feel it and for a moment stop talking about it as I feel stressed, just go with where is the feeling in my body, it is easier to shift that feeling in the moment or later than if I label it as something. One of the biggest things in my experience has been that stop labeling my experience, because I used to label everything, which meant that then I had a judgment or a previous understanding of what that meant. So if I am feeling something, let's say now, around my heart or my belly or in my head, all that I'm focusing on is there's energy moving there or there's energy stuck there. That's not good. That's not bad. That's not positive. That's not negative. That's not stress. That is not anger. That is just a feeling. And that way it is easier to move it because it's not connected so much with all of my past experience that I already know, like, oh, every time that I get stressed, this is what happens. Every time that I feel this is what happens. So I don't know if
right.
that's going to be helpful or not, but that's what I do.
Well, that's super helpful because I'm going to do that the next time, and I know exactly where the feeling is in my body. It's somewhere in my heart or left chest area. Now, when someone is takes that moment to feel where that energy is stuck or where that energy is, what's the next step? What do they do after that?
Well, sometimes there's nothing specific to do because a lot of times when energy or a feeling, which is energy, is acknowledged and awareness goes into it, it will just do what it needs to do because energy knows what it needs to do. Energy will just continue flowing and moving. So sometimes nothing needs to be done other than just being with it. Sometimes we need to do something, and that something can be breathing into it or bringing our awareness and consciously, imagine as if we are massaging it so that then that can flow easily, or we direct it to move towards somewhere else. So we can actively do certain things with that, or we can allow it to do what it needs to do. I try to do both. So depending on what I'm wanting to do or how much time in the moment I have, then it's what I do. Because sometimes, like if I'm in a meeting, for example, I perhaps don't have as much time to just, okay, someone did something, so I'm going to be with it, like and close my eyes and feel it, like I might not have the time to do that because the other person is in front of me waiting for me to say something. So in that moment, I'm more active in what I'm doing and how I'm moving that energy. Whereas in other times, if I don't have anything to do, if I'm myself, for example, or if there's more time because I'm around someone that understands this, then I'm able to just give it the space that it needs for it to do what it needs to do by itself.
Okay, that's super helpful. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the call today, Brian. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out to you and work with you?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for that. So my name, Brian Berneman, that's my website, brianberneman.com, or Brian Berneman on social media. As well, they can find me through the Conscious Action podcast, and so on the platforms, YouTube, mostly on YouTube, but any of the podcast platforms. That's been going now for 5 years, so there's a lot of episodes there for people to check out. And yeah, and then if they go into my website, depending on when they're listening to this, because I'm launching soon conscious moments as well, so that's going to be more practices online. So if you're listening to this perhaps in a month or two after we're recording this, that will definitely be on. So it's, I always say to people, go check it out. If you resonate with me and what I'm doing, great, reach out, potentially work with me. And if I'm not the person for you, go and search for someone else.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I love your energy. Thank you for the helpful tips today. And I will be practicing those conscious awareness of energy in my body. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the space for another conversation. And thank you for sharing this with your audience, because as I always say, it's just, like if only one person hears something that is interesting for them and then they start to apply it into their lives, that was worth my time. So thank you.
Absolutely.